Ladies and gentlemen, hello. On behalf of the Konstantinos for Democracy of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung and I would like to welcome you to this event. We are under the big shadow of a war that has indeed shattered Europe, a war which seems to be the catalyst, the accelerator, I would say, of the European course, or at least this is what we would like to believe. In spite of the fact that we are not close to Kiev, we feel the atrocity of war due to the Russian invasion, and all Europeans, we feel the need to defend actively our common values, peace, stability, and of course, freedom, but also human rights, the well-being of citizens, that is, all those threatened now by the Russian invasion in Ukraine. That is why, in spite of the fact that the war scene is quite intense these days, we decided that we should organize this event, which has been designed for the last period. We decided to do so quite consciously to demonstrate that we insist in talking about our values, values contributing to the progress of our society against the return back to the Europe 1 century ago. Exactly due to that, because we don't want to go back to this era 100 years ago, we are here to look ahead, to look into the development of our society, focusing on the policies of positive actions in favor of women in Greece and Europe. Prior to us starting, and prior to me presenting this panel, I would like to give the floor to Henri Bohnet, who is the director of the CAS in Greece, and then Panos, who is the director of the Scientific Council of Konstantinos Karamanlis Institute. Andre. Hello, my friends.
Welcome to our today's topic on women's affirmative action. As my colleague Panagiotis has already said, our hearts and minds are today also with the Ukrainians and in the Ukrainian war, stopping the Russian aggression. It's difficult to focus on any other topic. But still, we are asking ourselves, what could we have done before in order to stop the aggression and to try to make peace? In Germany, many people ask themselves if Angela Merkel was still the chancellor, would she have been able to convince Vladimir Putin or not starting the aggression? So we're already in the topic of thinking about how political leaders differ from one another. And we have a theory that usually women politicians might not be as macho, not as rash in their reactions to provocations as men are. Today we want to talk about this topic, and I think we can all agree that we need more women in politics and more women in society. And I just want to remind our audience that just recently a very important and influential politician in Greece has passed away, Marietta Giannakou, who has been also fighting for the role of women in the society, and we are all very sad that she passed away. But turning to today's panel, I'm very happy that we have so many interesting experts and women from different fields talking to us today about what we need to do in Greece and in Europe. I'm very thankful for them to be here and to be online also. I want to thank very much the Institute Karamanlis and our partners. Of course, my colleague Stathopoulos for making it possible, our translators. And thank you very much. I wish us a good discussion. Thank you.
Now I would like to give the floor to Panos Stathopoulos, who is director of the Scientific Council for the Konstantinos Karamanlis Institute for Democracy. You have the floor. Thank you. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to deeply thank you for this partnership. I would like to thank the Adenauer-Stiftung and Women Act. I would like to highlight that this event has been prepared since quite a while. The agreement for this partnership has a big background. Unfortunately, we could not have imagined this tremendous scenery, and of course I'm talking about the war. We mainly wanted to host an event that will promote our societies, at least when it comes to the modern European society. This was the central idea. But unfortunately, we reach a point To which I would say that one should think of the people of Ukraine, the Ukrainians it is, and perhaps the anonymous Ukrainian woman who, prior to claiming her post in a better world, right now, either she has to migrate with her children or she's left behind. Possibly, if she's left behind, she's wearing the colors of war. Let us hope that there will be a way out as soon as possible when it comes to this tremendous thing in the backyard of Europe to have such a war. I do believe that, or rather, I would suggest Panagiotis to dedicate this event to Ukraine and to the Ukrainian anonymous woman. Thank you. Thank you so much, Panos. Brilliant, this idea of yours, I would say. Let me present to you the panel that we have today, panel of eminent speakers, starting from Brussels, because we have the joy to have with us online the MEP Frances Fitzgerald from Ireland, representing the EPP. She is a group coordinator of the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality. Ms. Fitzgerald, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, and regards from my colleague Angela Niebler as well. But I'm delighted to be joining you on this important day, indeed, to be discussing the values in relation to gender equality and the role of the European Parliament and the European institutes. Thank you.
Where we are right now, with me, we have Mrs. Myladie Stoumbou, who is Regional Director of Microsoft Innovation Strategist and Startup Mentor. Hello. Thank you very much for your presence here tonight. I've read many of your articles and many speeches that you have delivered on the topics that we're going to discuss. So I'm looking forward to listening to you. And of course, Zanni, the co-founder of Women Act, a dear friend of mine, I would dare to say. She's also a woman who is quite active in the field of empowerment for women and the promotion of women, for women leadership. Thank you, May. And of course, our initial planning would be to have with us online from Cyprus, where she is, Mrs. Maria Syrengela, Deputy Minister of Labour and Social Affairs. Unfortunately, her agenda changed, so she had another obligation to attend to, and that is why we will have a video message that we shall watch throughout our meeting. So let me start straight away by Mrs. Fitzgerald. Let us go to Brussels. Let me ask you, Mrs. Fitzgerald, if yesterday you were in the plenary of the European Parliament during the speech delivered by the Ukrainian president. And a follow-up question, I would like you to give us the feeling that you got yesterday, because I'd like us to start the discussion exactly from that, from what is quite in the lips of everyone right now. Please give us the feeling that you got yesterday. We watched that on the TV and we were deeply touched. I imagine how you would have felt being there close. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you for starting at that point. It was, I think, as indeed people watching on television felt, it was deeply moving. I mean, you felt yourself having a combination of emotions, very touched by him saying, you know, this is about our children. We're losing our best people. We will not give up. And then the reality that the Russian army was a couple of kilometers away. And then he was being beamed directly into a parliament with more than 700 parliamentarians, totally on side, listening, doing everything we can, but at the same time, knowing the intense pressure he was under, and indeed the citizens of Ukraine, and that we were taking every action possible. And we did, as Ursula von der Leyen said, in 6 days, what had 60 years of discussion. Extremely good cooperation between Europe and America on the sanctions and indeed the democratic world. But just, what I was struck by really was just, it's them and us. It's the clash of democratic values and authoritarianism. And we have to fight for those democratic values. And of course, yesterday was completely touching. And another factor that was huge was the unity. We were united in solidarity. There was an incredible sense of unity right across the parties, right across the parliament. I mean, people were on the edge of their seats listening to every word that he said. And indeed, the Speaker of the Parliament, of the Ukrainian Parliament, when he spoke as well. And, you know, you wanted to do more. And yet we know that if we escalate militarily, we're into an extraordinary, impossible, you know, potentially nuclear situation. So there was a sense, to some degree, some helplessness as well, because it is the Ukrainians who are facing the onslaught. So I would say to you, it was a combination of emotions. But, you know, it does make you think about what we're discussing today, about democratic values, about the value of gender equality, the rule of law, respect for human dignity. All of that was going through my mind as I listened and watched yesterday.
Είναι ίσως μια ευκαιρία για να προωθήσουμε τις ευρωπαϊκές.
Maybe this is an opportunity to promote the European ideas. I remember the story that crisis in general pushed the European endeavor, and I feel that this current crisis could be proved as an opportunity. What do you think?
Yes, I mean, I think we're calling this a Kyiv moment. I mean, it has certainly thrown into sharp relief the issues, the importance, a new space, I think, for a debate about defence and security, actually, for all of us. I mean, Ireland is a neutral country, and yet when you see what's happening, it does, I think, move you towards a new debate about being unified in terms of dealing with aggressors, of how we need to prepare from a cybersecurity point of view. We don't, for example, have drones ready to go in to Ukraine. They're not available. And obviously trying to deal with missiles hurtling from 30 kilometers outside a city, conventional arms, you know, having a gun in your hand isn't much help when we see buildings being blown up. So I do think, you know, and also the response from a humanitarian point of view, we're bringing in a directive that has not been used before to give all the Ukrainians who need it access to our countries for 2 years without having to go through any of the procedures that asylum seekers have to go through. They can bring their families, their goods, their pets. I mean, that's what we've done. And this is extraordinary decision-making, I think, and very good leadership from the Commission, from the Council, and transatlantically, and from all our member states who are responding just so strongly. But this is going to go on, and of course we will have to sustain this over a longer period, and there will be many dimensions to it. There will be a health dimension, economic, budgetary. There are very big questions, humanitarian support for those who have had to leave in the circumstances they've had to leave. So these are going to be very big challenges, and I know in Greece you've had to deal with some of those challenges, those humanitarian challenges, and I know how amazing you've been and how challenging it's been. But this is now going to be a very, very big issue for us to deal with and cooperate around. There are big issues for us to think about here in Brussels and what kind of support we can give to member states.
Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ. Πάμε να ακούσουμε τώρα
Thank you so much. Let us listen to the introductory remark sent by Mrs. Syrengela. She is talking about that is how we can connect our topic with the news. Let us watch the video, please. Hello. In view of the International Day on Women's Rights, I would like to remind you that daily we must promote and defend the rights of women. This is because history has taught us that it suffices to have a crisis to defend rights, and the danger to annul many conquests is quite tangible. In crisis like this one, crisis felt by men and women, felt by people fighting for their country, can become the foundation for gender inequality. The values of war goes against the values of life and freedom. No person should live this atrocity. No child should be raised having fear in his or her soul. No family should be afraid of the next dawn. We are very sorry for the loss of lives and human suffering of the Ukrainian people having to deal with this crisis. Our thoughts are close to them and close to our diaspora, especially close to Mariupol. Thank you. So let us start with an introductory remark to warm it up. May, would you like to start? Yes, of course. First of all, on behalf of Women Act, let me thank you for this co-organization with Konstantinos Karamanlis Institute and with CAS, the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung. I would like to say that Panagiotis Kakolyris is a champion of our organization. Yes, I have two hats. Yes, exactly. And our co-founder, Adagoni Kofidi, worked a lot on that. Of course, as said before by Panos, when we started this discussion, we could never have imagined that the situation could be so dramatic. Let me add that I read something very interesting. The 17% of the Ukrainian army are women, which shows that if we were there, possibly we would fight. So this is food for thought. Apart from our acknowledgement, let me tell you about our topic and let me represent in a way the civil society, and this is where we belong as Women Act. We are one of the organizations fighting in Europe to empower women. We are dealing with the public sphere in Greece. We were founded in 2017. We are 8 co-founders. Ever since, more than 2,000 women have participated in our programs. We are known for our leadership seminars, very intensive workshops to provide women with tools so that we could be members of the parliament, or we can become candidates in the elections. We have the joy, in spite of the pandemic that stopped us, we have the joy to have founded hubs out of Athens. We are present in Kavala, Thessaloniki, Alexandroupolis, Patras, Rhodes, and other places in Greece. I would like us to start our discussion with the following. What changes have we seen? That is, if we had this discussion last year, things would be different. We were affected by some factors, like the pandemic, the fact that we saw some issues arising, being in the news. Unfortunately, we had a tripling, if I recall well, of domestic violence events. According to the statistics, the deputy minister knows the statistics, of course, better than I. We had with us Me Too at last in Greece. So this is a concern amongst the people. And the public opinion is the one that promotes the fact that these days there is no impunity because all facts are revealed. The state is close to us. We have seen as civil society that there are many new programs like the teachers of the neighborhood and programs supporting gender equality. Let me tell you that we must think of some issues that I will table right now. First of all, the fact that we see many men dealing with gender equality, which to us is very important. We have them in the Women Act as champions. Let us here say that we believe that the programs that we are having, mentoring women, are very important. This can make a difference. And we can see that mentoring is here to stay for Greece. Globally, this has been a phenomenon. There are nowadays many networks to support women. We're very happy because when Women Act was founded, there were not so many, but now we have many synergies with other organizations. We have also issued a book called Είναι επικίνδυνη, She is Dangerous in Greek. We had also a show on the TV, and what will touch us greatly in the future, and perhaps we can talk about it later on, the future of labor and how women in specific will be impacted by what comes next. Thank you so much, May. Mrs. Stoumbou, a word? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this invitation. I would like to thank Konrad-Adenauer and the Karamanlis Institute, of course, Women Act. I participated in this edition in Επικίνδυνη, She is Dangerous, the book. Prior to me starting, I would like to say that tonight I'm wearing the hat as the head of the Committee Women in Business of the American-Hellenic Chamber, and not wearing my hat as a professional or director of Microsoft, in spite of the fact that we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. Equally, I will combine my hats then. Women in Business is a committee of the American-Hellenic Chamber having one aim. Our aim is to empower the female presence in entrepreneurship and multiply the footprint of women in the overall economy. We are interested in women who work. We are interested in women leaders, women entrepreneurs. In this framework, we are doing many events. We do participate in consultation phases when it comes to different aspects relating to entrepreneurship and the future of labor. Broadly speaking, our values, and I like what Mrs. Fitzgerald said before, she talked about values. Our values are the following: respect of human dignity, respect of diversity, equality, access to chances, access to education, access and perspective for personal development. We are having a discussion today that for us is very important. This should be done throughout the year, not just due to the International Day dedicated to equality. Unfortunately, this year, under the heavy shadow of the news in the European sphere, things are quite different. Our values are put in doubt. And I would say that our thoughts lie within the people who right now have to flee their homelands, who right now have to protect their own democracy, their assets, their personal lives, their family peace. To me, the biggest idea is that our democracy should not be taken for granted. Our financial prosperity should not be taken for granted, nor our life. That is why this discussion is of value, because I do know right now, I know many women that either go to the army or they flee their countries and they become refugees with their children. Now, when it comes to women in today's society, this year's celebration about the International Day of Women has one goal set by the UN. This goal is that equality between the two genders is a main leverage for sustainable development. And the important role that could be played by women based on the sustainable development of the UN about equality, about the climate change, about the protection of all these values that we said before, is an important factor. Later on, I believe that we're going to discuss about where we stand now in Greece. What are the steps taken? Because, you know, some significant steps have been taken in entrepreneurship, apart from domestic violence and the protection of women. In entrepreneurship, many steps have been taken. Let us see how we can increase the participation of women into the new financial and entrepreneurial being, which right now changes gradually. There is also the overall environment, but also we have to take into account the technological development. The future of labor evolves in different ways, and skills, capacities, and the continuing access to new skills should be a part of a new design. Women are more vulnerable, so we need policies that will help women to have chances, to have opportunities in this new economic reality. You both said that many things are taking place. There is a mobility, there are many policies, there is big awareness among society. I would like us to see to what extent these have an aim. Do we have some tangible steps that make us optimistic? Let us start by Mrs. Fitzgerald, so that she can give us the European perspective. That is, to what extent are you satisfied and optimistic based on the steps that have been taken shortly or recently in this sector? Thank you.
Well, there's a long way to go, as my colleague there has said. I mean, women's representation, whether you're talking about Greece and Parliament and business, or you're talking about Ireland or many of our member states, you know, we have a very unrepresentative democracy still. It's still unfinished business in many of our countries. And we really need to get more diversity into our parliaments and more shared decision making. And we need more men to take responsibility for this as well, I think. So, I mean, there's a lot of work to do to answer your question. We have made progress, but we have new issues. You have all of that concern about violence, cyber crime. You have the sexual harassment. You have unfinished work in relation to combining work and family life and childcare. But let me tell you some of the things that are happening. I mean, if you look economically and from a budget point of view, we have this incredible money during COVID that has been now given to our member states. There is an equality dimension to that. And we have to take our governments and keep our governments to account to make sure that that money is spent on equality issues. There's a percentage for climate, there's a percentage for digital, there is not a percentage for equality issues. Now, I would like to have seen a percentage of money that's definitely going to go on equality issues, including, for example, care. But the good news is, in terms of the initiatives coming from Brussels, that I think will be very important this year, Ursula von der Leyen, in her State of the Union speech this year, mentioned a new care strategy. Now, why is that important? That's important because care and women doing most of the care, whether it's elder care or childcare, although men are doing more and younger men are doing more still. I have 3 sons, I know that. But let me say that the care issue goes to the heart of the difficulties women find in combining work and family life and not having adequate pensions, not having adequate pay, and so on. So we need to deal with the care issues across Europe. Who is doing the caring? How are we going to organize it with an aging population? Are we going to build in more training, more supports? And I could go on about that for a long time. But let me very briefly mention a few other initiatives that are coming that I think are very important. We're going to have a new directive on violence against women to make sure that it's a Euro crime so that we get action right across Europe, on an agreed basis. We're going to have pay transparency. That's really important. That's coming out shortly. We have a new directive on women on boards to make sure that there's a 40% representation of women with targets for all the member states. Now, Germany has just taken away the objections to that. All of these initiatives are very important. I've just come from a meeting with other women members of the FAM committee here, where we discussed a topic you've touched on already, which is women entrepreneurs. The Commission just this week has unleashed a huge amount of money to support initiatives by female entrepreneurs across Europe. I think that's very important. But of course, the big thing is we're recovering from COVID. COVID has been a setback. There has been a differential impact on women, undoubtedly, across the world. Women have left the workforce. Women have found working from home, while there are excellent aspects to it, it is not a substitute for childcare. So we have to think again about our childcare supports. And women have done a lot of caring during the pandemic. And as we know, there has been that differential impact economically, socially. More men have died from COVID. More older men have died, very sadly. But we've had the socio-economic impact on women has been very, very high. So it's a mixed picture as always, but there's plenty of work for all of us who are discussing this topic here today to be getting on with, let me say.
Yeah, so we said the European perspective. Let us go to Mrs. Syrengela. Let us watch the video and then let us evaluate the policies that have been implemented lately in a very difficult and demanding European and national environment, which has been deteriorated due to the pandemic. We started timely to diversify our policies and work on the substantial aim of gender equality with targeted initiatives and perspectives. We have shaped a course highlighted and echoed in the National Plan on Gender Equality 2025, not just by defending women's rights, but also enhancing the positioning of theirs in the society. The efficacy of our policies is acknowledged. We challenged the European Institute to pass a bill on the positioning of women in the decision-making centers. Our country is included in the best practice of the UN when it comes to women, following our decision to have a specific leave for working women due to the quarantine, but also we had some raising awareness campaigns to protect women against violence. Moreover, as a good practice, we adopt the strengthening of women refugees during the pandemic, as well as the interpretation service due to our through our hotline. Of course, we must not be complacent because women are facing many obstacles. That is why we keep on working and we are struggling daily. Yes, many problems. Let us see how these steps are being implemented in practice and what is the impact of those steps. Mrs. Stoumbou, what do you think about it? Well, I would start by the negative comment to go to the positive aspect. Yes, the nice one. First of all, let us say that the pandemic, as mentioned by the previous speakers, the pandemic had, or rather was for women vis-a-vis men. We conducted the research following the first year of the pandemic in the American-Hellenic Chamber, the Women in Business Committee. The conclusions were very interesting because we asked men and women how they experienced teleworking and how they participated jointly in the care of the elderly or children and in the household. It was important to say that men evaluated quite greatly their participation in the care of children while in teleworking vis-a-vis the evaluation of women for them, which means that they believed that they did something more. They believed that this was too much for them, for men, which told us some things about the structure of the Greek family. Still, we have a long way in front of us to talk about equal participation. This will leave a footprint, you believe? Well, it is an opportunity, if I'm not mistaken, because all of a sudden men stayed at home, they took good care of children, they saw the household affairs, they saw that this demands some effort. The word footprint might sound negative, but this is an opportunity to fight for a more just allocation of household businesses. Let me tell you that during the last 2 years, throughout the pandemic, there have been many positive steps. The Equality Index published yearly by the European Institute of Gender Equality, which ranks us last, or lower than the EU average at least. We rank 55, on average 58 for 2021. One of the sub-indicators, which is quite low, is the indicator of power, which is related to the participation of women in politics, the participation of women in entrepreneurship and in the social life. Throughout the last 2 years, a law was passed, the law on corporate governance, which demands from listed companies to have a 25% in their board. The 25% in the board should be women. A 25% might sound low, but before that, it was 10% or 11%, to be frank, when it comes to the participation of women in the board of listed companies. Their role was minimized to things related to the HR, that is a very limited role. My personal experience is that all of a sudden we became visible. We were invisible and then we turned visible. We started getting some phone calls. I'm talking now as a rep of a group of women with experience in terms of entrepreneurship, participation in the boards, which I believe is quite positive. I do not think that the planning was proper. At the beginning, there was a rush to deal with the law and abide by the prerequisites of the new law, but I believe that this was towards the good direction, because nowadays talent, or rather the gender is not an obstacle, to put it another way, says the speaker. The second thing that was equally important in my view was the effort made when it comes to the labor environment and the labor law. There are some provisions, and we must here congratulate the Ministry of Labor and to the Deputy Minister. There are some provisions about sexual harassment in the working environment. The law is very strict, and quite rightly so. There are provisions about the flexible not contract, but the flexible form of labor, so that a mom could manage her personal and professional life. And there are some provisions about leaves, the leaves of paternity, the leaves for reproductive aims, etc. This was also a positive step. The third step to me is Sima share, mentioned by May. That is, for the first time, we have an indicator showing which businesses have a very targeted policy when it comes to the issues of equality in the working environment. I believe that the communication throughout the first days raised awareness, and many more women wanted to see how could they get this gender, this equality label. So many employers will be led towards a more human-centric approach. Last but not least, about entrepreneurship and technology, which is my hat and my specialty. I would say that there is Innovation Lab, the Center of Innovation for Women, an initiative undertaken by the Deputy Minister in collaboration with the Norwegian model. It copies the Norwegian model. So together we have big businesses in the field of technology, academia, universities, bodies supporting entrepreneurship. So all together, the aim is to promote women as entrepreneurs. Women entrepreneurs who want to deal with new technologies, which right now give a horizon of economic growth, both for our country and for women themselves. Thank you so much. We talked about the boards issue. Let me here say my experience. I keep on listening by many executives that when the law started, they were wondering, how can we find women to have in the board? There were phone calls telling me, we found a woman for the board. This was the reality. Yes, we were invisible. What is important is that as time passed by, we start highlighting executives in the field of businesses, because this is what happened. Yes, there were executives, but stereotypes were the ones limiting our view. We wanted to find executives in specific profiles of people. There are many eminent women in all sectors, and we can see lately that women do progress in bastions of male. There are executives, but stereotypes limit down our view. Yes, you're right. May, you have the floor. Thank you. Let me tell you that indeed, women became more visible thanks to the boards. All of a sudden, they needed them. But women suffered a lot during the last 2 years because they became more necessary. We said that before. All of a sudden, they should take good care of 2 generations full-time at home, the one of the elderly and children. Women became teachers, the ones having minors. They were left at home. When a couple unfortunately had to choose, always the man kept on going to the office and the woman was left at home behind. So there was a mom in truck, and she became a part-timer unconsciously. Furthermore, we were talking about the post of leadership and the lack of women. When you are at home, you're not visible, so you have to go back to the office as soon as possible. If you need to reach a point someplace. In Women Act, we do observe that women supporting us are from 30 to 45 years of age. These are the most powerful years because at the office, they treat you like you had no family, and at home as if you had no work. So you feel a failure everywhere. We're talking about how many women will go forth, but this is a matter of self-confidence. All these stereotypes starting from the very young age, when we are young girls, now we're trying to empower that. And we can see that in the curriculum, there is a lesson, there is a course talking about gender equality. Nevertheless, my end point is that we in Women Act, we keep on wondering, why do we have so few women? We have so few women in posts of leadership in the public sphere because women are not paid enough for their jobs. Either this is a job at home or this is a job at the office. Women do not get the posts they want because they are marginalized when promotions are on the way. And when this time comes, Women Act do support women because we have very few female mayors. We don't have enough members of the parliament. But then women are a bit hesitant. I need to be optimistic. I want to be optimistic that the pandemic was an accelerator to look at some issues close, but I believe that the image that we got was not that positive. Yes, but there are some positive examples. Recently, I learned that the 70-75% of the directors of general directorates in the water sewage company in Greece, a utility company quite conservative in our views, but these main positions are kept by women, which was shocking and astonishing to me. I would like to see a female president of ADAP then. Okay. I will not succumb to this temptation. Now, let us go to the next cycle of questions and let us talk what are the benefits from the efficacy when it comes to the empowerment efforts to include gender equality. We talked a lot about the political decisions taken. Let us listen to the minister and then we will go to Brussels straight away. First, the minister, let us watch the video, please. Yes, the aim of critical posts by women is a worldwide issue. A worldwide issue. In our country, women are believed to be unfit for the public sphere. The new national plan on gender equality sets as a priority equal participation of women in decision-making processes and leadership roles. The aim is to increase the number of women in politics, the increase of the number of women in posts of responsibility in the private and public sector. Furthermore, the training and the education of women to become leaders. Already, we introduced the quota of women in the boards for listed companies with a 25%. Through the law, we managed to guarantee this quota measure in favor of the underrepresented gender for the sports club administration. We do support the participation of women in IT, new technologies, in the agile forms of labor, into a harmonious combination between the personal and professional life. Unfortunately, we must make many efforts still until we reach the golden rule and mitigate all inequalities. But leadership is inspiration and not gender-based. It is about organization, communication, efficacy. Thank you. So if we're talking about leadership and inspirational one, let us go to Brussels to see that in practice. Let us talk about this inspirational leadership because we have a very important historical conjuncture. For the first time, there is a president of the European Commission. She is a woman. And for the first time, a president of the European Parliament being a woman. Both coming from the EPP. Is it a coincidence? I don't know. So let us turn to Mrs. Fitzgerald. So let me ask you exactly that. What do you think, or rather, how effective is this policy of being inclusive in the political decision-making process? Thank you.
Well, look, I think it's absolutely enormous. I think we've learned the hard way that we need diversity in order to run our countries properly. You talked about peacekeeping earlier and conflict and the evidence around women when they've got involved in peace projects. And, you know, I do think there's a huge contribution to be made by women. I went to the UN when I was a minister. And, you know, what I saw there in the UN with the top ministers from all of the member states, very few women. You often saw the pictures of Angela Merkel and you know, so few women at the most high level. And to me, it does make a difference. I've been in a cabinet when there were 2 women out of 15, when there were 3 out of 15, 4 out of 15. I think you get the best from our world when you have women and men working together in equal numbers, I would say, at least a critical mass, which is 40% at least of either gender. And you know, what's interesting is the countries that have brought in legislation in order to increase the numbers of women on boards have seen a lot of progress in the numbers of women on boards. So, for example, we've seen a rise in the countries that brought in legislation of 27.2% in some places, going up to 36.5%. That's where you have the legislative action. And in other countries, you've only seen a rise of about 14%, where there's legislation in order to get women, onto boards. I mean, right across Europe, let's remind ourselves, we only have 30% of board members who are women, and 8% of the largest listed companies where women are CEOs. Now, consumers are 50-50, and many of these companies are taking decisions that affect consumers. We know that many women do a lot of the buying for households. They need to have women with their experience on these boards. And one final interesting statistic from Christine Lagarde, when she was in the IMF, she said, adding one more woman in a firm's senior management or corporate board by keeping the size of the board unchanged is associated with an 8 to 13 basic point higher return on assets. That's very interesting, I think. That's about economics. And I think the more we talk about gender equality going forward, we're going to have to talk about the economic loss of not having women being given their full opportunities. There is a huge economic loss for Greece, for Ireland, for all our member states, if women are not getting the level of opportunity, the critical mass of opportunity that are needed. This is a loss to our GDP, actually. And it's never really thought about like that. It's really thought about, oh, gender equality is a good thing to do, and it's the right thing to do, and we need diversity. But actually, it's an economic issue. And the more we put an economic lens on women's participation in society, the more we'll do about childcare, which also affects men, of course. And the more we will help people to, fulfill themselves, basically, because that's what it's about.
Έχετε δίκιο που το λέτε αυτό, γιατί πολλές φορές αναλύσουμε το ζήτημα.
Yes, you're right, because many times we're trying to analyze this issue only through a moral stance, through an ethical point of view. But there is a financial aspect as well. I'm afraid that sometimes numbers will persuade rather than values or prices, at least in this conjuncture, the conjuncture that we stand right now. Mrs. Stoumbou, Mrs. Fitzgerald talked about the issue of the financial contribution of the financial result, impact of women when it comes to the administration of businesses. I would like your experience of that, because you are in a business which is one of the largest, the most influential ones, so you get the image of the market. Yes, I agree totally with Mrs. Fitzgerald. Apart from ethical, that is, half of the population should have access to opportunity, there is also a financial aspect. There is a business case behind gender equality. What Mrs. Fitzgerald said, that is the fact that this was said by Ms. Christine Lagarde, companies having on board more women have a 30% bigger profit. It is a reality because there is research worldwide by McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, showing exactly that companies which have diversity on the board have better financial results and better profits compared to competitors that do not have this diversity on the board. Furthermore, it has been proven that the participation of women, the larger participation of women, empowers innovation. Businesses which have in their leadership more women have about a 50% more profit by innovative products, because you cannot develop innovative solutions or products with only one profile of people. You need different people with a diversified talent, with different skills, with different experiences that should be tuned in order to deliver innovation. So I agree that there is a business case. We have not measured the overall GDP that the European Union could win from the bigger participation of women, but I have a figure about new technologies. which is a male-dominant. Yes, it's a male-dominant one. In Greece right now, there are 4 times more women compared to men compared to women. The latest figure says that the new technology, only the 18% are women. There is statistics showing that 9% of women pre-COVID, now it should be bigger. 9% of women flee from their working environment because they cannot combine family with labor and work life. There are some statistics showing that in spite of the fact that 25% of businesses in startups and in startups relating to IT are women, the funding that women get are only 2 out of the 100 euros invested in similar companies. So 25% of companies are founded by women, but only 2 euros out of 100 go to these women founders of businesses. The European Commission, though, measured some years ago, I don't have the final figure, it measured that the GDP lost by the European Union due to the fact that women do not participate in an equal way into new technologies is 16 billion euros throughout the European Union. So this has been measured already. And I believe that if we measure it overall in other sectors as well, we can reach an amount which is huge. So this is an opportunity. I have a follow-up question. So I suppose that there is no bias necessarily. I'm not pretty sure whether there is bias or not. Okay, it was quite bold. I was quite bold in that statement of mine. Anyway, I suppose that there is no bias, says the speaker. In Greece, the European Development Bank, in the management duo, there is a lady. The CEO is a lady, Ms. Liberopoulou. Or when it comes to the European Development Bank, there is a woman CEO. You talked about startups. I'm talking about the ones who fund them. There is an infrastructure there. I'm afraid that we must take a step backwards and see whether we must enhance and support female entrepreneurship, not following the logic of funding, following a top-bottom approach, but following a logic. Let's see let us see why your idea cannot be funded. Yes and no is my reply to that, because the examples that you set exist, but they are isolated. If you see the whole picture of businesses that right now manage European funds overall, the percentage of men on the boards is quite big. I would say that there are many programs, and we have dedicated much time in the mentoring procedure of women entrepreneurs. I would say that this is quite right and quite good. I believe that it would be better sometime to measure the footprint, at least for Greece, the footprint of funding, because if we don't measure something, then you cannot improve it either. To improve a situation, you must measure it. How many startups do we have in Greece with women entrepreneurs? What are the funds given to the startups? Sometime we made a research with Metavalon, and money was quite few for Greece. It was not an official survey, though. There are many things to be done in this field, and I believe that we are at the beginning. Gradually, we can change mentality. There is still bias, and bias exists because the model created through years has a specific profile. To wrap it up, says the speaker, to skip technology, but the technology is my thing. The difficulty here and the critical moment is that new technologies in the 50s and the 60s started having an equal participation in the first teams in the US. But following the 80s, things were reversed. We had then the gig stereotype, which is male dominant, and ever since we have this course that we are mentioning right now. There are progress of empowerment, aren't there, in Women Act? Yes, I would like to add that we should change stereotypes, but to do so, because in reality, 52% of population are women, but we don't see them in as leaders. We need the proper tools to find visibility. This is where we come. Apart from the Academy of Leadership, we realized that sometimes there will be elections, and again there will be no women. So we decided to look into the root cause of that. We conducted a program entitled Candidates, which will help a woman who wants to run either for the first time or for a second time to plan her campaign. We shall give her the online tools. If you have lived in the US, you know that there are respective organizations helping women, because we do believe that this momentum should not be lost. The fact that now in Europe we have powerful women, the fact that now we have the first lady, the president of the Hellenic Republic, being a woman, which means that for the future generations, this will not be considered as a unique phenomenon. There must be women in the forefront, even if, and I'm saying so, a parenthesis here to the speaker, there is a debate about quotas. Why should we need quotas? Or what will happen with quotas? Quotas is a necessary evil. And let us hope that sometime quotas will be necessary for men, and not for women. I will dare to be a bit provocative, because sometimes we see things in our own views. We go back to what we were saying. Men should be our allies to that. That is how we can achieve gender equality. Because if we have a campaign in Women Act, and the institute has signed that, no more men. Because in Greece, the panels of events and conferences have 5 men in a row, and if we are lucky enough, there is only 1 woman being the coordinator. No offense, it's not bad to be a man coordinator, no offense to you. But what I want to say is that this is as if you were saying that women are good enough to be part of the audience, but they are not good enough to be in the panel, that they are not experts. We come to that, and we have finalized this arrangement with the most important think tanks in our country and people organizing conference. At the same time, we are telling women, come forth. We are preparing platforms where they can upload their resumes, saying that I am expert for that. They will come here and say, I am expert in that, because we are waiting for a deus ex machina, somebody else to put us in forth. But we have many more talents compared to a man who will be bold enough to say that I want to get that project. Okay, let us break this taboo. We have here 1 male coordinator and 2 women panelists. This is a gain from this event. We want to break this taboo equally. Let us go to Brussels again. Let us go to Mrs. Fitzgerald, because I would like to ask you, at the end of the day, what kind of measures are the ones necessary so that in practice we can enhance the presence of women in the big posts? Let us talk about politics, for instance, or about European politics. The issue of quotas in Greece is an issue debated for quite a while, and it has been raised by Mrs. Zanni. She talked about quotas, if quota is a necessary evil, that is. So I would like your view on that. Thank you.
Well, I've always been a supporter of quotas. I don't worry about some people saying, oh, women won't really make it, they're not making it on their own if it's a quota. I don't believe that. There's enough good women out there. And the United Nations describes quotas as a temporary, necessary measure. And that's how I see it. I think we do need quotas where the numbers are very low. In politics, you asked about politics as well as on boards. In politics, it's very low in Greece, very low in Ireland, 20% plus. It's not good enough. I mean, it's 80% male representation. So what are the reasons? It's historic, it's generational, but it's also about childcare. It's about the culture of politics. It's about getting your nomination, about conventions, and so on. It's cash as well. It's expensive to be involved in politics. So we know the reasons, and all of the political parties have an obligation actually to really get a move on, to accelerate what they're doing. You have to mentor. Mentoring was mentioned earlier. You have to encourage people to go forward. And when you're in politics, you know, I'm in politics 30 years. It's a very tough business. I've had my ups and downs, my successes and my failures. You need a lot of support when you're in politics. On women on boards, I think the quotas are going to come in now. Well, actually, it's more targets. But, you know, what I would say, and it's important to recognize this, the best companies are already doing this because they know their profit margins raise when they have diverse boards, when they have CEOs who are women, you know, and not exclusively, of course, but, you know, you get good results when you bring in female leadership as well as male. And I think the best men know this as well. And the best male leaders are taking on this issue and are showing a real commitment to it. We just need more of them. And we need the action to be accelerated. Because you know what? We can't hang around for another 70 years or 60 years. Well, I can't until I see gender equality. And, you know, I want this young generation of women not to have to go through the same slow progress that my generation of women have seen. You know, these values are too important not to get moving on them. They're too important for our countries. They're too important for Greece. They're too important for Ireland, not to make sure we're getting the best and offering the best opportunities to all of our citizens, to our young girls who need to do more science, engineering, technology. And in fact, the statistics are going the opposite way in Europe. So look, there's plenty of opportunity. There's brilliant women in all our countries working on these issues. There will be good leadership. There is good leadership from Europe, from Brussels, from our president of the Commission, and from other women. So I think, you know, it's a very tough time post-COVID with this new dreadful war now. This is going to put extra strains on everybody, but of course, primarily on the Ukrainian people. But we're in a new era in relation to this war as well, and that's going to be determining a lot of what happens, unfortunately, in the time ahead.
Αναφερθήκατε και προηγουμένως σε μερικές εμβληματικές περιπτώσεις.
You talked about some iconic cases of women who are in a leadership position in Europe. I imagine that Angela Merkel, because it's a matter of paradigm, it is very important to lead by example so that young girls could have this example in front of their eyes. As May said before about the Hellenic Republic president, it's very important to have a visible example. This should be clear. I believe that Angela Merkel has left her footprint towards this direction. I don't know, what is your view, Mrs. Fitzgerald, about it?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I mean, I just read that new biography of Angela Merkel, and I think she was absolutely remarkable what she did and sadly missed and almost impossible to replace. So we have to pay tribute to the very excellent women leaders that we've seen. But the point I would make is that we don't have enough of them. The critical mass to influence decision-making generally, you need to have that 30 to 40% balance in the room. We all know conversations are different when you have one woman or one man, you know, and a majority of the other sex. So what we have to do is get that critical mass in there. But role models matter. It makes a difference. People say that to me all the time. I know when I saw other women in politics and other women going forward, not afraid to put their name forward, you know, going for higher office. And I know my own life, I've been a minister in 3 departments. I know that has influenced other women to say, well, I can do it too. And that's very important. It will always be important.
Role models.
I think that it is a key word to face this issue. Yes, exactly. And we don't have enough models, because if we don't have many more women in leaderships, then we shall not get to elect other ones. We shall not open the door. I remember that when Margaret Thatcher was a Prime Minister of the UK, there were more young girls telling that they would like to become a PM, because this is what they were seeing in front of them. They believed it was more likely for young girls to become PMs. Imagine if at the house we have some twins. The girl believes that she will have a career in politics. In Greece, this sounds absurd, but we are the 52% of the population who is hesitant to make a step forward and deliver. I'm pretty happy you talked about this historic example of Thatcher, because indeed it's worth saying it. Mrs. Stoumbou, what about this role model issue? What about the entrepreneurial world? I agree with the previous speakers. Models are very important. When you see a woman entrepreneur, a woman leader, you get inspired. I'm saying so as a woman inspired by others when I was younger. You can make it happen. I think that is very important, especially in environments that are quite difficult. Inspiration in combination, though, with mentoring that was mentioned before, and in combination with networking, I believe, yes, it's equally important. We see that women find it difficult to invest time and develop networks. Of course, this is understandable because, as we said, women have many hats. They are undertaking the bigger part of the household labor and household works. Their timeline is limited, but networks may pave the way to move forward and get in contact with the models. So, in other words, I believe that by creating networks through organizations like our own, Women in Business, and linking women in different phases of their professional career, younger girls with leaders today, we can create a critical mass for the female leaders of tomorrow so that they can believe and claim. Because another thing that I have learned over years is that my personal development started when I believed that I could claim for it. Yes, it's very important. It's very important what you are saying. Let us talk about networks. Women Act has an active network, and I believe that this networking, as quite rightly Mrs. Stoumbou said, gives some new opportunities, especially in women of the periphery that do not have this easy access. Recently, you were in Thessaloniki, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, in Thessaloniki. And a network is built there in Women Act. What is your feeling? What you've gotten by these meetings that you are having in the region? I would say that in rural areas, there are many dynamic women. Women there are more dynamic compared to Athens. I was in Alexandroupolis, in Thessaloniki, in Kavala, in many other places in Greece. I see that women are thirsty for a better positioning. I suppose that the pandemic made them stay at home, so immediately they thought of getting a step forward. I see that they were interested in running for an office, which for us in Women Act is good news. But apart from that, in the public opinion in local societies, the issues of gender equality are more and more heard. They ask us some synergies, the local authorities are closer to us, but even more traditional associations and clubs come to Women Act saying to us, let us do something together, because this is the future, these networks. Some people want to do something else, yes. You talked about the pandemic, so I was thinking that one of the most shocking data that was emerged was the plague of gender violence. Within the pandemic, we were shockingly had to deal with this phenomenon. I'm not an expert to say whether this was intensified or not. In my view, this became more intensive during the pandemic. So let me ask you, has the way changed, the way through which we are tackling with gender violence issues? What else should we do? What has changed is that nowadays the perpetrator should be ashamed and not the victim. Until recently, for some reason, there was a social pressure that the women should not reveal anything. They should not embarrass the family, equalizing the perpetrator with the victim, as if you did something wrong. And that is why this bad thing happened. On the contrary, right now, with these high-profile stories, that were emerged with people who are quite known in the society. In Greece, we can see that even the less famous may denounce their case. There are some shocking stories that we saw in rural areas which make us understand that society should open up, and young women who are the victims should know that when they file a complaint about it, and besides the Ministry of Citizen Protection has delivered, there is a special training in the police stations about policemen, so that no woman should feel that they have to undergo a second torturing in the police station. And of course, the public opinion, which puts more and more pressure on every perpetrator, and the next generation will know what is right and what is wrong. Okay, I see. Prior to us going to Brussels to listen to the European perspective, let us go to the video number 4. Let us watch video number 4 by the Deputy Minister, Mrs. Syrengela. She is going to talk to us about policies and gender violence. Could we watch the video, please? The culture of silence has broken up. Our society is zero tolerance against any form of gender violence. Men and women felt that there are ears to listen to them and help them. The infrastructure of our ministry played a key role to that, with the 43 consulting centers, the 19 hospitality centers, and the SOS line 15900, which are always ready to support any woman. Meeting the needs of them, we adapt our actions and our policies. We are trying to cover any gap and support our social system. We have taken significant steps so that women can feel empowered, living in a safe environment that will be fear and bias free. We have created modern tools so that victims should get protected, and there will be no tolerance against the perpetrators. We must know that tackling gender violence, not just up to laws, we need as a prerequisite the active responsibility, the active stance of everybody, all citizens, male and female, civil society, NGOs, the state, and other bodies. Now let us go to the European perspective of that. Mrs. Fitzgerald, as you listened, Mrs. Fitzgerald, in Greece, there has been an emphatic presence of the population of gender violence. So let me ask you, is this a European narrative, and how is this tackled at the European level? Thank you.
Well, I think the first issue is that we've had a 30% increase in gender violence during the COVID pandemic. That's quite extraordinary. So there's a lot of work to be done. Let me put it to you like this. Every 10 years, a city the size of Marseille, Amsterdam, or Zagreb disappears, because 87,000 women worldwide are killed every year. That's the equivalent to a city the size of Marseille disappearing in 10 years. I mean, that's the scale of what we're dealing with, and that's death. That is not the continuum of sexual harassment and violence, of course, which can take different levels. But that's the number of women who are killed worldwide. It's an incredible phenomenon in our century that we are still at this point. So it does need, I agree with everything that has been said. We are more open about it. We have better legal provisions. We need legal provisions. One legal provision I brought in was coercive control. Where there is coercive control, it's important to have that. It's important to do in our law. It's important to do work in our universities on sexual consent in our second level schools. We need to be talking about this to young boys and young girls. There's an educational aspect. We still have very poor sex education, actually, across Europe. Liberated and all as our societies are, we actually don't do sex education that well in most countries. And young people tell me that. So I think we have to address all of these different issues. And it is, of course, about empowering women. It's about teaching men, because most violence is male on female. So we have to have other men taking responsibility for this. We have to see other men saying, what can I do to impact what men are doing, what my gender is doing to women. So I think we can do a lot, but it's actions in lots of different areas. And I think it's really important that the public unite behind this, because it's a societal issue. Mm-hmm. We've just had a dreadful murder in Ireland of a young woman out jogging, and it has galvanized the country on violence. It's given a complete new impetus to it. This was a young 23-year-old teacher out jogging along a canal near her home, and she was murdered. And this has in Ireland just galvanized. Now, this is happening in every country. So we do need to galvanize public opinion, resources. Our police forces have to be really well trained to respond to calls. So, you know, there are many issues, and the legislation will be stronger coming from Brussels as well. This new directive on violence against women, that will help our member states have stronger laws. So look, it's a sad story. It's a depressing story, I have to say, at a time when women are becoming ever more empowered, one could say. But you have this in parallel happening to many women. So a lot of work to be done. Women do not feel safe in many of our cities. We have to make sure that women feel safe on our streets, in our homes, in our towns.
Είναι πραγματικά συγκλονιστική αυτή η αριθμή που μας περιγράφει.
It's quite astonishing what you described, indeed. And in spite of the fact that you are saying that this is a social thing, and logically one wouldn't wait from the European Union to work as a catalyst in a social change overall, because our societies are a bit theoretical, I would say, in the European Union. It is important, you saying, that some important institutional legal interventions are ante portas, which are going to enhance this direction, because I believe that national governments need, how should I put it, a European push, I would say, towards these issues, and possibly a European collective know-how, because it is important to exchange know-how in how we are dealing with these kind of issues. We can exchange know-how in the best financial policies, but we must also exchange policies when it comes to the social policies. So, do you believe that the European Union can have a role in this direction?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we absolutely need leadership at European level. We need to work with member states to begin best practice networks, to show what other countries are doing, what other police forces are doing, the laws that are being brought in that are effective, giving women permission to stay in properties if they have been attacked. That's very important, but sometimes property comes before life, actually, and safety. So I think Europe has a very big role, and it is supporting best practice networks. It's working with NGOs and strengthening the laws that we have, the directives. So I think you are seeing that leadership from Europe, but you are right that many member states need a nudge, because, you know, some of this is about deeply ingrained attitudes to women. It's about how women are viewed in society. It's about cultural attitudes. It's about everyday sexism that we still see a lot of. So, you know, there are cultural attitudes here about how women are treated, and they go back a long way, and they're hard to break. So those of us who see this, who, you know, can cite it, can analyze it, and those who know about it have a real obligation, you know, to work on it, to help those who are more vulnerable. And, you know, a lot of women are vulnerable. It's not necessarily women from one particular class, shall we say, are more vulnerable women. This cuts right across all social classes, and we have to be aware of that. Of course, some women are more vulnerable and may not have the opportunity to leave the abuser. So there is much we can do, both at European level and at national level.
Να πάμε στο κομμάτι των επιχειρήσεων.
Let's now turn to businesses. Or rather, no, says the speaker, correcting himself. I have been thinking that I'm quite skeptical when it comes to the term feminicide. When I listened to that term, I didn't like it that much. Why not homicide? Why feminicide? it was wrong, according to me. I was thinking of writing an article about it, but let me think about it. As years passed by, I fully understand why we need this term feminicide, because society should perceive it as such and not follow a logic of a common homicide with other motives, without any gender dimension. Yes, but let me add to that, there is the impression that only now we have feminicide society, all of a sudden there is a huge increase. No. What happens now is that for the first time, what we were saying in the past, passion crimes or honor crimes, right now they are named as they should be, feminicides. It's quite important what you are saying, Panagiotis. We must name things as they are. Apologies for this intervention, but I had to say that. Now, let us turn to businesses. I understand that there is big awareness in businesses. At last, yes, Me Too at last helped at least businesses to be more afraid. Yes, and this fear works in a productive way. The gender dimension, that is discrimination against women in businesses, is something quite realistic. I talked about the labor law last year with very strict perspectives and provisions, with very strict sanctions against sexual harassment in the working environment. It is a step. It is a step which will make all executives have some second thoughts. But before that, we must change culture. Mrs. Fitzgerald talked about culture, that some things are very deeply rooted in our culture. So harassment has many forms. There is violent harassment, but there is also verbal harassment. There is sexist discourse, everyday sexism. As the MP said, there is discrimination based on gender in terms of opportunities and chances. I believe that businesses have an opportunity there. Implementing the law, they can educate employees and directors from scratch about what means participate in an equal way, what means accepting diversity, what means give some opportunities, what means give some channels, to make a reference to something that can be problematic, safe channels that is, so that I can have no retaliation. The employees will not be afraid of anything. So in a safe environment, the employees, female employees mainly, are the subjects of this discrimination. They will be able to report a case. It will take some years for that to get into the daily routine of businesses, but I believe that we have opened up the way, and gradually this will evolve. One thing that I would like to say, which was said before, I believe that through the awareness that we all have on gender violence in Greece, I agree with May, what we were naming in the past passion crimes, these were feminicides. Right now, we observe all these phenomena. This awareness, this social awareness, is an opportunity to create a culture of alliances, either within our society or within our working environment. If I am a male and I see a woman next to me, a colleague of mine, who is the subject of verbal violence or any form of sexual harassment or sexism, how should I behave so that I can defend the values, the human values of dignity, of equal participation, of respect towards my colleague? As a society, we are not there yet. We have some examples. I can remember the waitress who helped the other girl getting away from a person torturing a young girl. We need more examples daily. We need more examples in our working environment. If we listen next to us something which is not fair, we must be there for our co-citizen. We need that everywhere, and we need that by men. Yes, you're right. This must be the end, but I think that May has kept some notes. A final word, please, May, by way of conclusion. Yes, I would like to say that equality these days is something about both genders, and this is the biggest triumph of our era. That is, both male and female are talking about equality. Male can be champions of equality. What happens with women is not a matter of women only. It's a matter of democracy touching upon all of us. Thank you. Yes, you're right. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end. These are the last minutes of this event. By way of conclusion, I would like to thank, first of all, the participants, starting from Mrs. Fitzgerald. It was our great joy and honor to have you with us tonight. And indeed, we enjoyed your discourse, which was full of passion. And I always love politicians being passionate in their words. Thank you very much for that. I would like to thank Mrs. Stoumbou and May Zanni. Thank you. And May Zanni, I would like to thank the Deputy Minister for her videos. It would be very interesting. It would be very interesting if we could have her here with us. Due to practical reasons, she couldn't attend. But going to conclusion, I would like to deeply thank the team of CAS, Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, Mr. Lefteris Petropoulos, the always exquisite collaborator Joe Godzi from the Konstantinos Karamanlis Institute, because he is a pillar for our event. I would like to thank Ms. Antigoni Kouvidi, who is co-founder of Women Act, and together we co-shaped this concept of this event. Without her, we couldn't be here tonight. I would like to thank the interpreters and the technicians, because our signal reached your houses. I would like to thank you who have watched us. Before the end, let me tell you that tomorrow, CAS will organize a very interesting debate based on war in Ukraine, challenges for Europe and the world. This will be live on Facebook and on the YouTube channel of CAS. During the next days, Konstantinos Karamanlis Institute will have a similar event dealing with the peripheral issues of this big crisis. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Good night.